Okay, welcome to the DigitalBird camera slider build video. Okay, for this is the first section of the video. I guess the first thing you have to do is to work on the rail. So we have a standard V rail you'll see all over 3D printers. It has two rails and two connector points. Connectors are, the rail first of all is 500 millimeters long. It's tapped for M5 bolts. And for this first part, we need 4 of these 20 millimeter long, low profile M5 bolts. We need our 4 gantry plates, which come in the kit, mini gantries, and we need the 2 end connectors, one for the control panel end and one at the battery end. And last but not least, we need our power cable, which runs from one end of the rail to the other. So the first thing we need to do then is, if we have a look at the mini gantry plates, we can see that there are 4 wheels, and 2 of the wheels have straight circular spacers and 2 have hexagonal nut spacers. The hexagonal nut spacers allow us to control how tight the gantry plates actually run on that rail and allow us to adjust that. And the way we do that is just with a spanner. We turn the spanner on the nut and it just moves this wheel closer to this wheel so that we get a proper adjustment on the track. It's worth taking as much time as you need to get this right, because what you're really aiming for is that when you slide that on there, okay, that there is very little play. You shouldn't hear it rattling, but at the same time it shouldn't be so tight that it stops when you tilt the rail. Okay, so you want a nice smooth action on each of these, but you don't want it so tight that it's gripping and jamming, and you don't want it so loose that you can hear it rattle when you move. It's time to put on these end pieces. Now, you'll see there are 2. The one for the control panel end, this end up here, has a hole in the base, and the battery end does not. Okay, so these connectors just go onto here, line them up the holes on the V-rail, and put one on first. Okay, now we need our power cable, which is going to run the length of the rail. And we put one end into here, push it in, and then just run it all the way down. Okay, so it's around because I'm using my left hand. I actually prefer using my right hand. Okay, there we have it. That's the rail. First stage complete. Okay, moving on to step 2. Step 2, we have to do some proprietary work to these housings, the battery housings and the control housings. They all need a certain number of these. You'll find these in the kit. They are M5 bolts, if you like, heat. I'm not quite sure what you call them, but basically they're M5 inserts. What you'll need is a heat source. Make sure there's an adult present. You'll find in the kit as well, you should find an odd bolt and it's for just this purpose. And the heat source I'm using here is the kind of thing a chef would use in the kitchen for burning the sugar on the top of his creme brulee. But I have just used a gas hob before, just a small flame that's going to heat these to above melting point for the plastic, 120 to 220 degrees. Okay, so let's get going. Oh, the other thing you need handy is a sponge. And the purpose of the sponge is just to cool down these, stop them melting all the way through at the end. Okay. This gun works by turn it on, press the button, and we get our flame. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just take one of the plastic inserts here and just half a turn onto the end of the bolt. And I'm just going to use the flame here to warm up. Now usually you know when it's hot enough because the brass actually starts to change colour and become a bit darker. And that's when I know it's ready. Okay, I'll let it cool off just a bit. Check I've got the right holes. Press the part into here and press it most of the way down, then unscrew. Take my spatula and just press it on until it's all the way down smooth, and take my sponge and just cool the part off with the sponge. And there you have it. This, incidentally, is the sort of thing you'd use for icing a cake, but you can use any kind of flat blade at all just to help press that down easily. Okay, so here we are with all our inserts in place. At the controller end, we have 3 inserts on this side, 1, 2, 3. And on the motor side, the side with the cut for the NEMA 17, we have 1 insert on here. On the battery end, the side with the holes all the way through, we have nothing. But the side that is a solid on this side, we have the 2 inserts on that side. If you turn all of these upside down, they all have an insert ready for the feet to go into on the bottom. And that's all there is to our plastics inserts. Okay, so for the next stage, we can get these out of the way at the moment and just concentrate on the motor block. So before we're ready to start with this, we actually have to look at our motor and prepare this ready for its insertion into the back of the motor block. What we're using is a pretty standard NEMA 17 stepper. This one's 40 millimeters long, and that's the one that will come in the kit, ready with a lead that's the correct length for the kit, and a 20-tooth cog on here. Now, first of all, adding the cog, the dimension between the top of here and the flat of the NEMA 17 should be 28.5 millimeters. And it's quite important you get this right. So I will supply in the kit the NEMAs with the cog in place at the correct height. But if you just check on here, we should have near as damn it 28.5 millimeters. And that ensures that the cog is going to be absolutely in the center between the 2 halves. But before they put the stepper inside, we need the other cables that run through this hole as well to be ready. So next we're going to look at our encoder module. Now the encoder module here is an A5600. You can see it there. And what this module does is it measures a small magnet in the back of the stepper motor, which we've already got placed in here. which is diametrically magnetized. And as the stepper turns, the magnet turns, and the small chip here reads the position of that magnet extremely accurately down the I2C circuit. The one in the kit will come completely ready to go with the right length of cable and all the right coloured attachments. And it goes into this housing here. So the first thing is to prepare that housing. You'll find that in the kit we get a stack of 8 by 3mm magnets, just standard magnets. And we're going to use a couple of those inside this encoder casing just to hold that casing against the back of the NEMA 17. To do that, pull off a couple of the magnets. Okay, some super glue that actually works. What we're going to do is just put a little in each of these two holes here. Just to hold our two magnets. It doesn't matter with this which direction our magnets go in. It will matter for other parts, however. Okay. Next, take our cable and our encoder and we drop our cable through the slot hole here. And with the little chip facing down into the hole, we can just press that in. Now, we're not using screws or glue or anything else like that. All we need to do is make sure that that is in and that we can see clearly our chip, a 5600 chip, through the window. And we have our little cover for our encoder, and that's just going to go on top of here. And snap together. I don't glue it. I don't like the idea that I can't get in and fix something if something's not working or I want to check something. But there you go. Now the reason we've done this first, if we come back to our motor housing here, put that back on, is that we need this cable to run through this hole first, just sit like that. And then our NEMA 17 stepper, its cable needs to run through that hole as well. And then the NEMA itself comes in and sits against the back of here. All the way home and make sure it is firmly in place. We can pull our wires through and just let our encoder snap onto the back of there. That's it ready. We'll get ready. Next we take these 3 cap head bolts, which are I think 60mm long. Yeah, M3 cap head bolts are there in the kit, 60mm long, and those 3 are going to hold our stepper in place. I'm just going to put one in each of these slots here. Okay, so there we are with our stepper properly fixed inside the enclosure and our encoder in place on the back. And there are 2 cables coming through here, one for our stepper with the coloured cables and the 2 with the double prong on it for the encoder. Just stepping back a bit to the encoder, I mentioned there's a small magnet. If we can just take off our encoder housing here. The small magnet that you get with the kit is a very special one, and it's held separate from the others, not just because it's smaller, but because it's also diametrically magnetized. Now, what I mean by that is the conventional magnets that are in the rest of the kit, in the row like this, they're magnetized with the north and south poles on the faces of the disc. So that maybe be the north pole, and the other side would be the south pole. But with the diametrically magnetized magnets, if you were to draw a line down the center of the magnet, one side of it would be north and the other side of it would be south. So what we do is we take our small magnet, and you can, if you want, if you're finding a problem, put a little tiny little drop of super glue in there before you drop the magnet on. That's the spindle at the end of the motor, and it should sit just proud of the motor in such a way that if you just drop the magnet in like that, that's all you need to do. And then just put the encoder housing back on. Okay, on to the next step. Recap. We have our rail here. We have our GT2 belt in here temporarily, just holding it in place, ready for our assembly. These are temporarily in place, they're not fixed in place yet. That's the step further on. And they're just holding the belt so that it's in the proper position at the ends. So the next step really is to put in our limit switch. So a nice little board limit switch, comes with the cable, the correct size with the coloured terminator on the end. The limit switch goes in to this little slot here on the end of the rod, on the rod keeper. It goes that way in so that the slot takes the end of the board, and it just simply slides in and pushes all the way home. And what you should have is the cable flush with the end of the keeper, and on this side you should see your limit switch, which is triggered when the carriage comes along and hits the limit. What we can do then is take our center divider, and this will basically go between the two halves, the motor side and the controller box side, and it really just divides up the two and will sit like that between the two parts. Okay, before we put that together though, we have our little micro switch, which is our power switch, on off. Pretty standard, with the correct length of cable already on it for you. So we take our center divider. There's one of these for the battery side as well. This one, you can just follow the shape. It has this curve and the slot for the switch on the side. Put the cable through, decide which way you want to be on and which one you want to be off, and which direction. And that should just press home. That's it. And we're just about ready, I think, to start assembling. The next thing we need to do is, in the kit, you will have 3 50mm low profile bolts and 1 30mm profile bolt, and also 2 stainless steel axles, if you like, and they're here somewhere. Here we go. Our 2 pulleys. Okay. There's 2 holes here inside the motor end. You just press in your 2 axles and drop a pulley over each one. Next step, from the kit, find the 50mm low profile bolts and one 30mm low profile bolt. Take the 3 longer bolts, 50mm bolts, and place them through this side into those 3 holes. Take your center section, so over those screws, line them up, press it down, and then screw through until you just see the screws appearing through the orange plastic. There you go. Okay. Next step, prop up your rail on something convenient at this side. And you can see the shape of the rail end in here in the plastic and the slot. Place it down. Make sure this cable is flush. And drop it in until this is flush with the bottom of here. Okay, now we need to organize our belt. So the belt goes round here. If you lift the pulley out, take our belt around the pulley and drop it back down on again. And likewise with the other one. All those cables. Bring our pulley up. Wrap our belt around. Let it drop down and round here. Don't worry about those cables at the moment. The power cable comes up through the middle. Okay. So, check it's all working smoothly. We're ready for assembly. The last screw, the 30mm screw, keep that ready. Cables. Our switch cable here comes up through this hole in the control box. The stepper motor cable comes through the slot along with the encoder cables. Okay. And our limit switch cable. The power cable comes through this hole here. You can see this one. This square hole here. Pull it through. Okay, line up the little slot here with the slot on that one. Bring it down and you should find that it just connects. The important thing to make sure is that, just pull that off again, that the 2 spindles find their seat in the holes in the bottom of this piece. Easiest way is to line that slot up, bring it across, give it a little shuggle until it drops down. Okay, 30mm screw. Goes down into the hole in the control box and tightens up. Don't over tighten, just cinch it for the moment. And that should hold everything together well enough that we can then flip the whole thing over. Don't worry about this. And put those screws through. And the third one down here. Just pinch them and no more. They don't have to be super tight, they're not going anywhere. Check along the top and make sure that everything is working. Okay, now it's time to move on to the other end of the slider and tackle the battery boxes. Now we've made a small start and then we've got our insets already there in the boxes. But if you turn over, you'll notice that there are two tabs that just stick out. I don't know if you can see those very well on the camera. Now, in my wisdom, I decided that these should be printed separately and put in on the basis that if they broke off, you wouldn't have to replace the whole part, just pull out the old piece of tab and put in a new one. So what you'll need to have done is printed 4 of those little tabs, which are designed just to slot in. And I've put some of them in here already, but you can see the slot there in the side. You may have to dig out any support material that's in that slot. Just use a pair of tweezers to dig that out. The battery tabs themselves, it's easier if you just get a little bit of sandpaper and just take along that long edge there on the tab. I'm holding that up very well. Yeah, the long edge here on the tab. If you just take the edge off it so that it more easily goes inside the slot. Now the way it goes inside the slot is with this short part that sticks out closest to the battery terminal end, where the battery terminals are going to be, the 2 holes there. So we can see our slot here. What I do is I get a pair of tweezers and you lose it. Yeah. Get a pair of tweezers, hold on to the tab until you just find a little bit of that slot. Push it in a little way and then ease the tab back and down. Okay, and then we just use the back of the tweezers and just add a little bit of pressure and the tab should just nicely press down home into the slot until that long edge is flush and you just have the little tab sticking up. Okay, so you have 4 of these to do, 1 in each of the 2 battery bays. In the kit, you'll also have this custom-made battery harness with our little DigitalBird logo on there. And these are designed for they're designed for the Sony NP batteries that are used on everything really in photography, from lights to displays to flash guns, you name it. So basically these prongs will go into here and accept the Sony NPs. If you look closely at the harness, there are 2 sets and 1 set of wires is longer than the other set. If you look on the back of the 2 battery bays, one of them has a square hole cut, and that's for this little board here to slot into. So there's no glue or anything. Once it's in place, it can't move. So basically, you just drop that board into that slot. Now, the cables with the short end go on this side. And you can see the holes, and there's a slot along the bottom that this little board goes into. So what we do is we take the short one, bring it in, should fit into that slot, and then just press down evenly on both sides. And just use some sort of tool just to press it down all the way. So the lead with the longer leads goes to the other side. The board goes into the slot. With a little bit of gentle persuasion, until it's as far down as it can go. On this side we can see the two prongs, and just check that our battery, when it goes in, meets the prongs. Okay, so after fighting with this for quite a while, the biggest problem I found was keeping those cables in this slot here. And the easiest solution I've found, because I happen to have one, is to use a small glue gun just to hold the cables in. And so what I'm going to do is just inject some hot glue in along there. Okay, cables hot glued in. What you're going to need from the kit are two 30mm bolts and your two spindles for these two pulleys. As I said before, I'd like to put a little bit of grease just on these pulleys. Never inside here. You don't want any grease on the belt whatsoever. So make sure that's clear. And then just drop that on there. Take off any excess grease. And make sure you keep the grease off the pulleys. Okay, centerpiece now. So our centerpiece has a slot in it here for the cables to go through. And this is the part I found trickiest, was basically getting these cables to stay in place and not get trapped between the part. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. So now these cables are running through here. Previously when I attempted this, the cables kept jumping out of the slot and getting trapped between the back and the orange part here. So what we can do now is, just to hold that all in place, is take one of our screws, put it through here, and it presses through, and that keeps everything in place. And then we can check fit that. And make sure that our two spindles are going into these holes. Okay, on that side. Perfect. Okay, this next part is also quite tricky. So we have our cogs in here, and we have our battery lead coming in and connecting into the socket here on the small board. I've got it propped up just to make it level. What we have to do is take our belt around the cogs. It'd be easier just to remove the cog, take the belt over. And put the cog back. It's here are working and in their proper place. We can look at joining this up. Simply goes over the top and should connect. Just hold it together. Sure, screws are connected. Take our 30mm bolt back. Again, don't over tighten things. It's enough that they just grip. Okay, so we have both ends in place, and it's probably now a good time to help stabilize it so we can work on it a bit more. So to that end, we're going to put the feet on. And we have the 4 feet. Each of these feet requires 3 of these small magnets, and it's really important that the magnet in the foot and the 2 magnets underneath attract each other. Speaking from bitter experience, it's so easy to get them the wrong way around and find that the magnets are repelling, or at least one of the magnets is repelling and preventing it from working. So the method I've found easiest is to take your stack of magnets, okay, peel one off the top and put it in, peel the next one off the top, put it in the same way, and go around all 4 of these first, and just do it that way, and keep the magnet stack the same way around each time. So the way we fix them is just some good old-fashioned super glue. We just take a dab of super glue in each of these holes. Don't need an awful lot. Okay, we'll do those 4 first. So don't let go of this stack. Once you've got it in your hand, hold on to it and keep it the same way around. Okay, so the first one I'm peeling off, and the top is going to go down and into the hole. Peeling off, and the top is going to go down into the hole. You pretty much have to destroy your part to get these out if you get it wrong, so make sure you get it right. That one's being stubborn. Leave that one there just now. There you go. So take your time, mark the magnets if you need to, but just make absolutely certain before you super glue them that they are attracting each other. Otherwise the foot isn't going to do what it's going to do. Other than that, there's nothing much more to do to the feet. In the pack, or in the kit rather, you will get a roll of neoprene, which is self-adhesive on one side. You simply put your foot over the top, and using a knife you cut around the shape of the bottom of the foot, and that just gives a nice padding and makes the thing rigid. and also prevents some of the vibration from the motor coming through and into the table surface if you have it sitting on a table. So the feet are mounted to these using 4 of these 10mm low profile bolts, and it simply goes through the hole on this side. The long side goes against that. That goes on there. And it screws down. And the idea of the magnets is that it flips between its open and its closed position. So it's held by the magnet as you go. You don't want them too tight so it's too stiff. You just want it enough so that it still flips. It's probably too far away for the camera to see that. So both feet on both sides. Yeah, completely in place, and they just flip in out of the way. Likewise on this side. Simple as that. Okay, next we're going to look at installing the Nextion touch display. Okay, in the kit it comes like this in its box. It has a throwaway cable, our Nextion display, and a small little adapter which allows you, using the throwaway cable, to add power to your Nextion display so you can program it. But since the DigitalBird software is already pre-programmed onto this with the kit, that's not something you need at the moment. That's not to say though that we won't update the software at some point, and you may need that, so it's worth keeping hold of it anyway. If we take our display and have a look, your Nextion display will have a cover over the front which you'll peel back at this stage before you put it into the housing, because you won't be able to take it off otherwise. In the back of the Nextions, you can see that there's a little card slot here, which is what you would use to program the Nextion, and we have made a custom cable. Now, in my wisdom, I managed to get the cable a little strange, in as much as, if you have a look, I don't know if you can see on that card, but we have plus 5 volts at one end and ground on the other. In my wisdom, on the motherboard, I managed to put the plus 5 volts next door to the ground on my card. So you'll find that one end of this cable, while they're both 4-pin, goes straight into the plug here, and the other end has to twist to meet the motherboard ground and live wires. Okay, I'll also label this cable in case it comes separate from the Nextion to say which end should go in the Nextion. Apologies, next time around. Okay, so we have here our display case, and all we have to do is drop in our card. You can see the small cut on this side of the case. The Nextion display just drops in there like that. The cable then gets tucked down carefully so it's running 90 degrees away. In the slot here, it goes down. And there's a little slot there in the side. It has to push, the bottom end has to push into that until the cable starts to flow in. And you should find it should go in without too much difficulty, perhaps a little persuasion with a screwdriver. There we go, it's in. Okay. So the cable's going around here in this slot, down in this slot and out through this center section here. We then take our cover plate, and that goes in, and there are two little lugs at the top and the holes, and obviously this has to line up with the plug on the next end. That should just go into those lugs first. There we go. And drop down like so. And then we use two of those little screws that come with the kit. Screwdriver, and we just screw these home. Voila! And you'll notice as well there's a small, and yet another small magnet which goes in here, and that magnet works. If you look on the control panel on there's another place for a magnet here, and basically when that sits in there, that just keeps this shut when you're in transit, and then you'll be able to hinge it open and it will snap shut against the magnet and just keep that screen held down like that. Onward. What's next? Okay, it's starting to get exciting now, coming closer to the end. Now it's time to look at installing our motherboard and the brains of the slider. First thing I'm going to do though is organize some of these cables and just put some hot glue in to hold them in place. So the power cable, for example, there should be inside. You can see that very well. Inside that slot. Remember, the board's going to go over the top of this, so we don't really want there to be any big blobs of the stuff there. Dang, that's hot. Right. Okay, switch harness one will come around and come down here. And we'll put just a little bit of glue down at the bottom there. Just keep that in place. Now that cables are tidy, if we take our motherboard, and basically on the motherboard you have an RF nano, you have a stepper driver here, and you have an octocoupler here for controlling the camera. You have your limit switch here, your power switch here, 12 volt supply, your battery goes in on the red, and these two cables here are for your encoder. And obviously this plug here is for your stepper motor, which goes into that one. The only plugs that aren't color coded are these two. You'll notice they're two 4-pin. Now this one is obviously for the stepper motor because it's close to the stepper driver. This one is for the display, and it has the TX and RX on the side of it. So just remember the stepper motor goes next to the stepper motor driver. Okay, so the way that it slots in here is that the USB port here aligns with the hole in the side here. You can see that. And the board should just neatly just drop into place and sit down. And then we can start arranging our plugs. So black goes to black, our power switch. Easier perhaps if I just pull it out again slightly. Battery cable, the red goes to the red. Over here we have, on the same cable, our encoder. The white goes to the white, the purple to the purple. Now, just check that these haven't popped out as you press them in. Your limit switch goes on here. And I hate these connectors, never mind. Okay. Your stepper motor goes in here, next to your stepper driver. Okay, so with everything else in place here, the one thing that's missing is our, and this comes with the kit as well, our 2.5mm camera shutter jack, and it's designed to work with these proprietary cables. Now you get these obviously for different kinds of cables. This is for the Sony, but you can get them for Canon, Fuji, any of the major brands. And basically 2.5 is the standard for those cables. I think occasionally you can get them as quarter, but you'll struggle. The majority of them are 2.5mm jacks. So basically just take the plug through here. Pull it through. And it should just press in to place like so. And that can come round, and this goes into the blue port here in this bottom corner. You can see that. Make sure with all of these that the pins haven't been pushed out. One of the common faults I find is that plug everything in, something doesn't work, and it's because when you push the plug in, some of these pins just tend to pop back out of the casing. For the time being, that's everything in place and plugged in. Obviously you still have your Nextion display, and that can go into the display port. Now, the moment of truth has arrived. Will it start first time? Take our Sony NP battery, drops in here. Okay, so the moment of truth. Will it turn on? Yay! Okay, and we'll just check whether our encoder is working. And hit play. And it's all working great, I think. Okay. So the only other thing I haven't done here is put this little heatsink onto the stepper driver. It's quite important because these can tend to get quite hot. Okay, so when we're happy that everything in here is squared away properly, what we can then do is fit the cover to the inside of that. Now you'll notice that the cover has a hole in it and vents just to allow some of the heat to escape, and also to allow the stepper driver vent. So what we'll do is just turn this on its side. We'll just take that up out of the way at the moment. So the cover has a small slot along, well, a small extension along one edge. That goes in, and you'll find that there is a groove inside of the controller cover. That should just go in there and just drop in like so. And then we use two of our smallest screws. And into each corner here. Okay. And the last step for the control compartment is if we get the cable to come down here, tuck that inside. All the way, and bring that over. We'll just turn this on its side. So now we need these 30mm long. I think they're 2.5. Just check that. 30mm long. 2.5 M2.5 bolts, cap head bolts, and we have one in each side that go through and make the hinges for our door. So we can just screw these in now. Okay. And we'll put some super glue probably around that just to hold it in place once I'm certain that everything is as it should be. So I'll try it again. There we have it. Okay, so the final step to finish off these housings is to put the cover plate on, and these basically just slide into the slot here on the top along. Okay, this gives a nice finish and closes off all the mechanism inside. And likewise, for the battery compartment side. This part goes down. Voila. Okay, as I mentioned before, we put these things on, which I call the sleds, very temporarily before, nothing screwed in place, really just to hold on to the ends of the timing belts. Now, what we're going to do is put the ends on the timing belts, or the keepers, properly, and I just want to do a breakdown on that. So each of these are identical, but one is top and one is bottom, obviously. You insert a small magnet into each one. You can see that there. And it's very important, obviously, again, that you keep the magnets with the poles, common poles, in each part. It just makes life a lot easier when it comes to the belts. It means if you reverse the belt, then it's still going to collect in and not push the thing out, because it's north and against north. So I've already put those two in, making certain that the poles were identical. Okay, so our belt keepers are these little bits of plastic, and they come in two parts. So you have a cap on the top, which just pops out, and you can see a serrated section here where the belt goes, and then the cover cap goes on, and we put a small screw through here to hold the belt. Now, I used to super glue the belts onto these, but when it came to adjusting everything, it was a real pain. You basically had to cut the end of the belt and throw it away. But I discovered that these little screws that you'll find in the kit here, just tiny little things, that's all it takes is one of these through here, and you never see a moment's problem. And if you need to change the belt, adjust the belt in any way, then you just pop out that little screw, move the belt a notch along here, and put this back on, put your screw back in, and it works perfectly. I've never had a belt come off in action yet. And make sure before you start that if it's a T-shape like that, and that's the leg of the T, it's the leg of the T that's coming out through the hole here with the belt going into it. So when you put that in there, there should be no resistance. It should just pop easily in and out. If it's sticky at all, you know, give it a rub down and make it easy to come in and out by hand before the magnets go on. Easiest to do it before the magnets go on and the belt isn't in. So just take a bit of time, go over these, make sure they fit into these parts before you go any further. Okay, it should be a nice neat fit, and it shouldn't have much resistance coming in and out. Okay, so the way I get the magnets in and make sure I get them the right way around, take a magnet, drop it on. That's going to be the top that goes inside there. A little bit of super glue. I like the one with the brush, it just makes life a bit easier. I'm just going to grab the brush in there. That's all we really need. Make sure the surfaces are covered. Now we're going to take our magnet off of here, and we're certain it's that side. Turn it over and drop it in to the belt keeper and press home. Give it a little rub to get as flat as possible in here, and that's one down. Make sure it's clean of glue, and I'll just drop that in there to hold it in place. So now you see that just snaps in there and comes out really easily based on the magnet. Do the same with the other side. Drop a magnet. So if we have a look at our bottom belt, first of all, there's two belts. This one here we're going to leave as the last one we attach, because this is going to control how much tension there is on this belt. This belt is going to be 50-50. And as I mentioned before, the smaller belt goes on the battery side, the bigger belt in the kit goes to the controller side. And this is the one that will need adjusted on the bottom. Not the one on the top, but the one on the bottom. Okay. So what we'll do is as a demonstration, we'll put the top one on, because everything gets fixed here on the top one. So put that out of the way. I've already put the magnets into these and made sure they fit. So if we look at the top, that's the way it's going on, and over here we're going to have our level, a little spirit level on that side, and that's going to be closest to the controller. So take our belt keeper. The way I like to do it is just place the belt keeper on the belt, level with the end, flush with the end. Then take our belt, and it should be coming out, the belt should be coming out the leg of the T. Remember the T? That's the leg. Press that over the top. Make sure that these line up. Okay. Now what I usually do, there is a small hole in here ready for these screws, but it's a wise move just to take a very fine drill, and the size of drill that I'm using is 1.5, about 1.5 drill, 1.5 millimeter drill. And with the belt in place, perfectly on the end, just lay it flat, and I'm just going to drill straight through the small target hole and through the belt. That way when I come along with my small screw, I'm not fighting against cutting into the rubber. Thumbs. Sometimes it feels like you have 10 thumbs. Dang. Okay. And so what will happen is that will just pop into there and pop out of there, hopefully just as easily. It's important as well to see that none of this comes any higher than the edge of the black there, otherwise there's a chance it could rub on the rail and cause friction. Okay, and this belt will be on this side. So I'll take this one and perform exactly the same task for this one. Next thing here is that you'll see in the bottom we have a quarters camera screw, and the shape, there's a couple of nicks in it, and that takes the handle that's on the camera screw. These come in the kit and are a specific size for what we're doing here. But basically you can screw that in now. Through the hole until it comes loose, and then just let the lever come, and now that won't turn because the handle is against the edges of the plastic there, so as it's locked in place, and it won't fall back out because it's stopped from falling past the gurneys, because it's basically they're going to be on the face of that. Okay, so that's just about ready to put together. So what we'll do is take our belt and put that in there. I'll take the belt from this side and put that in here. Okay, and then this should lock down. That's it. These 10mm low profile bolts, and these go down into here, 4 off. Last thing for the top is our little spirit level, which we drop into here. We should be able to drop into here. Excellent. So this is the last step. We've got all 3 ends in and this top piece screwed in place. What we have to do now is get the last one in. Now, when we pull towards each other, you should see some tension. If there isn't enough tension, basically you need to undo the screw, move the belt 1 notch or 1 tooth of the belt out this way, and try this again. And keep doing that until you have just enough tension. You can just get that in there, and it just takes a bit of tension to actually just pull it around and let it drop up inside there. Okay. So there's some tension on the belt. Okay, so with our slider turned upside down, this plate isn't currently fixed to anything, but will be with these two 10mm bolts. We put one in the first hole, we skip a hole, and then into the next one, another 10mm bolt. Then we take a Swiss plate. This doesn't come supplied in the kit, it's really up to you to supply the fixings yourself, the camera fixings and the tripod fixings. It's 120mm long, this is 120mm long. You can't afford a plate that comes past that because it will hit the battery side or the control box side. So this plate simply sits on there. 120mm long ones have two holes, a slot and then two holes. So on this side, the left hand side, we use a 50mm bolt this time into the first hole, and we should find our empty hole underneath. And on this side we're using the slot to fix through to the other empty hole here. Make sure it's lined up square with the edge and tighten up. That's it. We can switch it on. Give it a quick test. Say we want to change our out point, slide it to where we want it to stop, there. Takes us back to the beginning, we hit play, and everything is sliding beautifully. Job done.